Somewhere along the way, perhaps in childhood, perhaps in a marriage, perhaps in a workplace, where you always had to prove your worth, you were taught that being a good person means always saying sorry. Say sorry when you take up too much space. Say sorry when you disagree. Say sorry when you're tired, when you say no, when your needs inconvenience someone else's expectations. And so, over the years, the word sorry became less of an apology and more of a reflex, a way of making yourself smaller so that others might feel more comfortable. But I want to offer you something today, something the Buddha pointed to again and again in his teachings. Humility and self-erasure are not the same thing. Humility is the recognition that we are not separate from the world, that our happiness is woven into the happiness of all beings. But self-erasure, the chronic apologizing for simply being, that is not a virtue. That is suffering. And it is suffering we do not have to carry any longer. You are over 60 years old. You have raised children, buried parents, kept promises no one ever saw you keep. You have failed and started again. You have sat with grief and chosen somehow to keep going. You have earned something profound. Not pride in the arrogant sense, but the quiet dignity of a life actually lived. Today, I want to walk with you through 7 things you should never apologize for, especially now at this beautiful, hard-won stage of life. These are not permissions I am giving you. They are remembrances of who you already are beneath all the years of apologizing for existing. Let us begin. 1. Your need for silence and solitude. The phone rings and you don't answer it. Your neighbor invites you to a party and you stay home. Your grandchildren visit and afterwards, magatir, even though you love them deeply, you need 3 hours alone to feel like yourself again. And somehow, you feel guilty about this. You wonder if something is wrong with you. There isn't. In the Theravada Buddhist tradition, there is a practice called viveka, often translated as seclusion, withdrawal, or aloneness. The Buddha himself regularly withdrew from the company of others, not because he didn't love people, but because certain truths can only be heard in stillness. Certain depths of the heart can only be reached when the noise of the world has softened. Choosing silence is not rejecting the world, it is going more deeply into it. And yet, how many of us over 60 apologize for this very thing? We say, "I'm sorry, I'm just not very social anymore." We say, "I'm sorry, I just need a quiet morning." We preface our very real, very legitimate need for inner peace with the word sorry, as if solitude were a character flaw. I want you to hear this clearly. Your need for silence is not a flaw. It is wisdom beginning to speak. At this stage of life, the movement inward is not antisocial. It is the most natural spiritual development a human being can make. The great mystics across every tradition, Buddhist monks, Christian contemplatives, Sufi wanderers, they all discovered that the deeper you go into life, the quieter you become. One of my students, a woman of 65, told me that her adult children were concerned about her. She had begun waking at 5 in the morning to sit quietly, to watch the light change, to meditate. They thought something was wrong. They said, "Mom, you're isolating yourself." She looked at me and smiled. She said, "Venerable, I have never felt more connected to everything." Never apologize for choosing stillness. You are not withdrawing from life. You are finally, fully arriving in it. 2. How you choose to spend your money. You spent 40 years building something, working, saving, sacrificing. You went without vacations so your children could go to college. You drove old cars so the mortgage could be paid. You deferred your own desires again and again because that is what responsible people do. And now that you finally have a measure of security, now that the children are grown and the mortgage may be paid, someone has opinions about your money. Maybe it's a family member who thinks you're being too generous to charity. Maybe it's another who thinks you're not generous enough to them. Maybe it's a friend who raises an eyebrow when you book that retreat, that river cruise, that cooking class in Tuscany you've dreamed about for 30 years. And so, the apologies come. I know it's a lot to spend on myself. I probably shouldn't, but... The Buddhist teaching of dana, generosity, is one of the most foundational virtues in our tradition. But here is what is often misunderstood. True generosity begins with the recognition of your own worth. A person who gives from guilt is not practicing dana. A person who spends freely on others while privately punishing themselves is not practicing generosity. They are practicing a kind of self-erasure dressed up as virtue. You are allowed to spend money on your health, on your peace of mind, on experiences that fill your soul, on a comfortable chair, on a beautiful bowl of soup in a restaurant where no one needs anything from you for 1 uninterrupted hour. No one who was not present for your 40 years of sacrifice has the authority to tell you what you have earned. Guilt about money is almost always someone else's expectation wearing your face. You do not owe anyone an apology for how you choose to live on what you have worked a lifetime to build. 3. The relationships you have outgrown. The Buddha's very first teaching, the cornerstone of everything that follows, is the teaching on impermanence, anicca. Nothing stays the same. Not flowers, not bodies, not feelings, not seasons. And not people. Not the version of you that needed what certain relationships once provided. Not the version of your friend or your sibling or even your spouse that used to fit so naturally alongside you. People grow, people change. And sometimes, with great love and without any fault, two people simply grow in different directions. When this happens, the compassionate and honest response is to acknowledge it. But so many of us, particularly women of this generation, have been conditioned to hold relationships together at any cost, to apologize for growing, to shrink back into earlier versions of ourselves so that others feel comfortable. I have met so many people over 60 who are still maintaining friendships that have not nourished them in 20 years, out of loyalty to a history, out of guilt, out of the fear of being perceived as cold. And let me say something that may feel uncomfortable. Compassion does not require you to keep bleeding for people who have no interest in healing. There is a difference between releasing a relationship and abandoning a person. You can love someone from a distance. You can wish them well genuinely with your whole heart and still choose not to spend your limited, precious time in their company. Letting go, when done with equanimity and without resentment, is not a failure of love. It is one of the most mature acts of love possible. You have perhaps 60, 70, 80 summers remaining, maybe fewer. Choose carefully who you spend them with, and do not apologize for that choosing. 4. Your body's honest limitations. American culture has a complicated and often brutal relationship with the body. From a very young age, we are taught to push through, to work through pain, to sleep less, do more, be tired, and call it strength. The body's signals, hunger, exhaustion, discomfort, the quiet plea for rest, are treated as weaknesses to be overcome rather than wisdom to be heard. And then 60 arrives. And the body, this extraordinary vehicle that has carried you through 6 decades of living, begins to speak more firmly. The knees speak up on stairs. The back offers its opinion after a long drive. Sleep has its own terms now, and the body enforces them. And what do? We apologize. I'm sorry, I can't stand that long. I'm sorry, I need to sit down. I'm sorry, I get tired easily now. The word sorry, again, for the most natural thing in the world, for having a human body that is aging exactly as human bodies are designed to age. In Buddhist teaching, the body is understood as rupa, form. It is not you, but it is the vessel through which you experience this life, through which you practice, through which you are of service to others. It deserves your reverence, not your contempt. When the body says rest, that is not laziness, that is intelligence. When the body says I cannot, that is not weakness, that is truth. Channu, right speech, includes speaking truthfully about your own reality. Your body has carried you for 60 years without a single day off. It has healed cuts and broken hearts. It has held babies, dug gardens, driven long roads, weathered illness, and kept going. It has never once abandoned you. It does not deserve your apology. It deserves your gratitude. Say what you need, rest when you must, and release the reflex to make your physical reality something you must justify to others. 5. Your opinions, especially the uncomfortable ones. The Eightfold Path that the Buddha taught includes Sammaditthi, 30, right view, the cultivation of wisdom, the willingness to see things clearly, even when clarity is inconvenient. Right view does not mean hiding your perspective to keep the peace. You have lived 60 years. You have watched things unfold that younger people have only read about. You have made decisions, some brilliant, some costly, and learned from them in ways that cannot be taught in a classroom or downloaded from the internet. That accumulated, embodied wisdom is not an imposition. It is a gift if you are willing to offer it. And yet, how often do people your age soften their words to the point of silence? How often is a real observation swallowed because someone younger might roll their eyes? How often is the word sorry inserted before a thought that deserves to be spoken freely? I'm sorry, I might be old-fashioned, but... You are not required to preface your experience with apology. Now, I want to be precise here because the Buddhist teaching is nuanced. There is a difference between speaking from wisdom and compassion and speaking from ego and anger. An opinion delivered with contempt is not right speech. An observation wrapped in self-righteousness does not serve anyone. But an honest, considered, experience-grounded perspective offered with care, that is something the world desperately needs more of, not less. Wisdom held in silence to avoid discomfort is wisdom that helps no one. You do not need to apologize for what 60 years have taught you. Offer it, speak it, gently, clearly, and without shame. 6. Your spiritual path, even if it's unconventional. Many of you watching this video came to Buddhist practice later in life. Perhaps you were raised in a different tradition. Perhaps you drifted away from religion for many years and then found your way back. Not to where you started, but to somewhere new, somewhere that finally made sense to your heart. And perhaps that path has not been understood by everyone around you. Perhaps your family wonders about the small altar in your bedroom. Perhaps friends raise an eyebrow at the mala beads around your wrist. Perhaps you have sat through holiday gatherings where your inner life felt invisible, or worse, suspect. And so you have learned to minimize it, to explain it away. I know it sounds strange, but I'm not trying to push anything on anyone. Let me say something clearly. The path that leads you toward compassion, toward stillness, toward the reduction of your own suffering and the suffering of others, that path needs no defense. In the Buddhist understanding, each being carries their own karma, their own conditions, their own unfolding path toward liberation. No two paths are identical. What resonates in your heart as truth may mean nothing to someone else. And that is not a failure of the teaching. That is simply the nature of human diversity. Your spiritual life is the most intimate dimension of your existence. It is where you meet yourself at the deepest level. It is not a performance for others' approval, and it does not require their validation to be real. You do not owe anyone an explanation for what brings you peace. And I say this with full respect for every sincere path toward the good. Whether your practice is Buddhist, whether it draws from multiple traditions, whether it involves sitting quietly in your garden watching birds and feeling something vast and nameless, if it moves you toward love, toward stillness, toward less harm and more kindness, then it is real and it is worthy. Walk your path without apology. The light you are walking toward is yours alone to find. 7. choosing peace over being right. And now we arrive at perhaps the deepest teaching of all, and the one that is most often misunderstood. There is a quality in Buddhist practice called upekha, in Pali, the language of the early Buddhist texts. It is usually translated as equanimity, a steadiness of mind that is not disturbed by praise or blame, gain or loss, pleasure or pain. Upekha is not indifference. It is not the blank face of someone who has stopped caring. It is something far more subtle and far more powerful. It is the ability to remain centered, even in the middle of chaos, to let the storm pass through you rather than carry you away. And at 60, there is a particular expression of equanimity that becomes available, perhaps for the first time. The ability to choose peace over being right. You have likely noticed this. Someone says something you know to be incorrect. In the past, you would have corrected them, perhaps argued, perhaps spent hours composing the perfect response in your head. But now, sometimes, you simply let it go. You smile, you redirect. You find that the argument and its outcome and the satisfaction of winning it matters less than the feeling of a quiet afternoon with people you love. Others may see this as passivity. They may think you have given up, that you no longer have strong convictions. They are wrong. Choosing not to fight is not the same as not knowing what is worth fighting for. In fact, it is the evidence of a person who knows exactly what is worth their energy and has learned through long experience that most arguments are not on that list. This is not weakness. This is the fruit of a mature practice. This is equanimity in action. At 60, you are no longer auditioning for anyone's approval. You no longer need to win every room. You have learned, perhaps slowly, perhaps painfully, that your peace of mind is worth more than any argument you have ever won. Do not apologize for choosing that peace. It is the most hard-won thing you possess. 7 things. Silence, money, relationships, your body, your opinions, your spiritual path, your peace. These are not small things. These are the architecture of a life. These are the dimensions where, if we are not careful, if we are not awake, we spend our remaining years apologizing for the very things that make us who we are. I want to leave you with something I have observed after many years of walking alongside people in the later chapters of their lives. The people who seem most alive, not in the youthful, restless sense, but alive in the way of deep rivers and old trees, they share something in common. Not wealth, not ease, not the absence of difficulty. They have stopped waiting for permission to be themselves. They have made peace with the fact that not everyone will understand them and that this is all right. They have learned to receive the disapproval of others the way a mountain receives weather, noticing it, not running from it, but not being moved from their ground. This is what is available to you now, right now. Not when you have figured everything out, not when the people around you finally understand. Right now, exactly as you are. In the end, as the teaching reminds us, only a few things truly matter. How much you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go of the things that were never truly yours to carry. The apologies you no longer need to give, those were never yours to carry. This week, I offer you one small practice. Each time you feel the reflex to say sorry, pause. Take one breath and ask yourself honestly, am I apologizing for a mistake I have made? Or am I apologizing for simply existing? If the answer is the second, let the apology go. Offer a bow to yourself instead. You have been walking a long time. You deserve that. If this teaching has touched something in you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today.
And if you would like to go deeper into any of these reflections, I welcome you in the comments below. Tell me which of these 7 speaks most to your own life. I read every word. May you be well. May you be at peace. May you be free. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.